The Toad and the Snail by Roald Dahl in Dirty Beasts. The Toad and the Snail. I really am most awfully fond of playing in the lily pond. I take off shoes and socks and coat and paddle with my little boat. Now yesterday, quite suddenly, a giant toad came up to me. This toad was easily as big as any fair-sized fattish pig. He smiled and said, "How do you do? Hello, good morning, how are you?" A very delightful toad, clearly. His face somehow reminded me of Mummy's sister Emily. The toad said, "Don't you think I'm fine? Admire those lovely legs of mine. And I'm sure you've never seen a toad so gloriously green." I said, "So far as I can see, you look just like Aunt Emily." He said, "I'll bet Aunt Emily can't jump one half as high as me. Hop on my back, young friend," he cried. "I'll take you for a marvellous ride." As I got on, I thought, "Oh, blimey! Oh, dearie me, how wet and slimy!" "Sit further back," he said. "That's right, I'm going to jump, so hold on tight." He jumped. Oh, how he jumped! By gum! I thought my final hour had come. My wretched eardrums popped and fizzed. My eyeballs watered, up we whizzed. I clung on tight. I shouted, "How much further are we going now?" Toad said, his face all wreathed in smiles, "With every jump it's 50 miles. Quite literally we jumped all over." As you can see, the boys on the back of the toad. From Scotland to the cliffs of Dover. Above the cliffs we stopped for tea, and Toad said, gazing at the sea, "What do you say we take a chance and jump from England into France?" I said, "Oh dear, do you think we oughter? I'd hate to finish in the water. But toads, you'll find, don't give a wink for what we little children think." He didn't bother to reply. He jumped. You should have seen us fly. We simply soared across the sea, the marvellous Mr. Toad and me. So, where do you think he ended up? Clearly in France, as he said. Then down we came, and down, and landed in a funny town. We landed hard, in fact we bounced. "We're there, it's France," the toad announced. He said, "You must admire it's grand to jump into a foreign land. No boats, no bicycles, no trains, no cars, no noisy aeroplanes." Just then we heard a fearful shout. "Oh, heavens above!" the toad cried out. I turned and saw a frightening sight. On every side, to left and right, people were running down the road, running at me and Mr. Toad, and every person, man and wife, was brandishing a carving knife. They'd seen a giant toad, obviously wanted Toad's legs. People, it didn't take me very long to figure there was something wrong. And yet how could a small boy know, for nobody had told me so, that Frenchmen aren't like you or me. They do things very differently. They won't say yards, they call them meters. And they're the most peculiar eaters. A Frenchman frequently regales himself with half a dozen snails. The greedy ones will gulp a score of those foul brutes and ask for more. In many of the best hotels the people also eat the shells. Imagine that. My stomach turns. One might as well eat slugs or worms. But wait, read on a little bit. You haven't heard the half of it. These French go on, even more a gore, if someone offers them a frog. You'd better fetch a basin quick, in case you're going to be sick. The bits of frogs they like to eat are thighs and calves and toes and feet. The French will gobble toads, loads and loads of legs they chop off frogs and toads. They think it's absolutely ripping to guzzle frogs' legs fried in dripping. That's why the whole town and their wives were rushing us with carving knives. They screamed in French, "Well, I'll be blowed! What legs there are upon that toad! Chop them, skin 'em, cook 'em, fry 'em, all of us are going to try 'em." "Toad," I cried, "I'm not a funk, but ought we not to do a bunk? These rascals haven't come to greet you. All they want to do is eat you." Toad turned his head and looked at me and said, as cool could be, "Calm down and listen carefully, please. I often come to France to tease these crazy French who long to eat my lovely tender froggy meat. I'm a magic toad," he cried, "and I don't even have to hide. Stay where you are, don't move," he said, and pressed a button on his head. At once there came a blinding flash, and then the most almighty crash, and sparks were bursting all around, and smoke was rising from the ground. When all the smoke had cleared away, the Frenchmen with their knives cried, "Hey! Where is the toad? Where has he gone?" You see, I now was sitting on a wonderfully enormous snail. His shell was smooth and brown and pale, and I was so high off the ground that I could see for miles around. The snail said, "Hello, greetings, hail. I was a toad, now I'm a snail." I had to change the way I looked to save myself from being cooked. "Oh, snail," I said, "I'm not so sure. I think they're starting up once more. for French were shouting, "What a snail! Oh, what a monster! What a whale! He makes the toad look titchy small. There's lovely snail meat for us all. We'll bake the creature in his shell and ring around the dinner bell. Get garlic, parsley, butter, spices. We'll cut him into 50 slices." There you see the magic toad turn into a snail, and they're still after him. "Come, sharpen up your carving knives. This is the banquet of our lives," I murmured through my quivering lips. "Oh, snail, I think we've had our chips." The snail replied, "I disagree. Those greedy French, they'll not eat me." But on they came, they screamed, "Yahoo! Surrender the brute and run him through. Surround the brute and run him through." Good gracious, I could almost feel the pointed blades, the shining steel. But Snail was cool as cool could be. He turned his head and winked at me, and murmured, "Au revoir, farewell," and pulled a lever on his shell. I looked around, the snail had gone, and now who was I sitting on? Oh, what relief, what joy, because at last I'd found a friend. It was a glorious, glamorous, absurd, enchanted roly-poly bird. He turned and whispered in my ear, "Well, fancy seeing you, my dear." Then up he went in glorious flight. I clutched his neck and hung on tight. Nearly done. An interesting bird. We fairly raced across the sky, the roly-poly bird and I, and landed safely just beyond the fringes of the lily pond. When I got home, I never told a solitary single soul what I had done or where I'd been, or any of the things I'd seen. I did not even say I rode upon a giant jumping toad, 'cause if I had, I knew that they would not believe me anyway. But you and I know well it's true. We know I jumped, we know I flew. We're sure it all took place, although not one of us will ever know. We'll never, never understand why children go to Wonderland. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you.